What would you say is one of the most important characteristics of a friend? Deborah. Loyalty, all right. Somebody else. What would you say is one of the most important characteristics of a friend? Alicia. Honest when it hurts, even. Okay, Walter? Being a good cook. Okay, all right. All right. I count you a good friend, but I don't think you can cook. I'm not even sure I want to try eating something you make, but no. Somebody else. What do you think is important, Brother Wayne? Trustworthiness, okay. Someone else. Anybody else? We've got trustworthiness, we've got being a good cook, we've got loyalty, we've got Brother Dan. Okay, not being judgmental. All right, all right. Somebody else? Any others? Jean. A good listener. All right. Good quality to have. Good quality to have. Deborah, you already had one.
Good sense of humor.
A good sense of humor. Okay. Qualities of a good friend. One more, Alicia?
A Christian, like a godly Christian.
Oh, there's a good one. Yeah. Having a godly friend. That all comes together with all the other stuff. All right. That's good. We are going to look at one characteristic tonight in a minute, but there was a man, he lived on Long Island, and he had been saving up for something to satisfy this lifelong ambition. It doesn't sound like a huge ambition, but he'd always wanted to have a really high quality barometer for in his house. He just thought that would be a really cool thing to have. Spent a lot of money, got this thing shipped to his house, and he pulled it out of the box, and it looked like the needle was stuck on hurricane. And he looked around and he's shaking this thing and everything else. He thought, this is crazy. Like this, I spent all this money and this thing doesn't even work, and it's stuck here. He stuffed it in the box, and he wrote this scathing letter to the store about taking his money and getting this thing that he'd been saving up for a long time, and then he put it in an envelope, and then he drove to New York City to go to work. He mailed the letter on his way to work, and he went to work, and he came home, and his barometer was gone. And so was his house, because there was a hurricane, all right? And he didn't trust it, but trusting, okay? Brother Wayne mentioned trustworthiness for a friend. You know, many would say that trustworthiness is one of the, I'm sure most of us would agree, that is one of the great qualities. That's, I like the cooking one too, mind you, but I think trustworthiness is a quality we would probably all agree would be a very important quality to have in a friend. Can he be a friend if you can't trust him, all right? How do you gain the trust of someone? How do you lose the trust of someone? We're going to look at a man tonight, and many may have not have. You've probably read his name before, but just skipped right over it because he's not in there a lot. His name is Ittai. Okay, I think that's how you pronounce it. That's how we are going to pronounce it here at Berean, all right, because that's what I think it is. But his name is Ittai. How many knew who Ittai is? All right, good. We're going to learn tonight about a man named Ittai. I want you to take your Bibles and come with me to 2 Samuel chapter 15. 2 Samuel 15. If we were to back up, it's still in 2 Samuel chapter 15, just to kind of give you an idea as to where we're at in the life of David and this man named Ittai. So don't be reading ahead on me here, all right? We'll get to him. But just to understand where we're at, Absalom, his son, had come to David beforehand, and he'd asked him something. If we come up to verse number 7, okay? Absalom, as I told you before, Absalom had kind of buttered up people. They would come to get something judged, and he would come up and he would kiss their hand, and he would say, well, you know, if the king had somebody, you know, that could answer these questions, you know, we would do that, and I would give you a good favorable report and so forth. And it says that he won the hearts of the people in verse number 6. It says, and on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And it came to pass after 40 years But Absalom said unto the king, this will be 40 years into David's reign, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. And for thy servant vowed a vow while I abode in Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me again into Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. That sounds like a really good thing, doesn't it? Sounds like Absalom's a good guy. But let us read on. All right? And the king said unto him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. He says that I have to go to this place because I want to confirm my vow and to do my vow before God. And David says, yeah, well, go. All right. God bless you. Off you go. But he had another plan. And what he wanted to do was once the people are there, Absalom wants to take over the kingdom and usurp the throne. And as he does this, we see that a message comes to David in verse number 13. It says, and there came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And he finds out that Absalom is taking over the kingdom, and there's all kinds of men that are behind him. His main counselor, Ahithophel, was behind him as well, and we'll look at him at a later date, and it says that his wisdom was like getting the oracles of God, okay? It was like whatever he said had to be true. And he had switched over from David over to Absalom, from David over to Absalom. And David, as David is escaping, he says, we need to get out of here. And he leaves 10 of his concubines back in the kingdom, which Ahithophel comes up with this idea later. When we look at Absalom, he says that you're going to do something with these women in front of everybody. You're going to defile these women in front of everybody that shows that you have taken over the kingdom on the rooftop. Okay, there's going to be a tent up on the rooftop, but that's what he's going to do with all of these ladies. All right, and here's the man that's supposed to be representing God to him, and he tells him to do this vile thing anyway, and Absalom goes ahead and does that. But anyway, David leaves these 10 ladies behind, these 10 concubines of his, and there's several people that go with him. There's many people that go with David as David is leaving and going to head over the brook Kidron, all right? And at this time of the year, the brook is overflowing its banks, okay? And he gets there, and he's going to have to flee. Verse number 14, it says, and David said to all his servants that were with him in Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us and smite the city with the edge of the sword. David was not only concerned about himself and his friends, but he didn't want the city, all of the innocent people in there that Absalom would come in, figured that he was going to bring his men in from the other city and come down to Jerusalem, and all kinds of innocent Israelites would die. David didn't want that to happen, so David said, we're going to leave, even though it's a walled city, all right? But David leaves, and many people come with David, all right? And we get to verse number 19. It says, and then, as these people are going through, it says, then said the king to Ittai the Gittite. What is a Gittite? What is a Gittite? All right? A Gittite, in 1 Corinthians, I'm going to give you one example, okay? In 1 Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 5, it says, and there was war again with the Philistines, and Elhanan, the son of Jair, slew Lamai, the brother of Goliath the Gittite, whose spear staff was like a weaver's beam. Goliath was a Gittite. Goliath was a man who lived in Gath, all right? And in all likelihood, everybody living in Gath would probably be Philistines, all right? That's just one of the 5 main cities of the Philistines. There was Ekron, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gaza, and Gath, all right? They were the 5 main cities. We know that when the Israelites lost to the Philistines the Ark of the Covenant, you remember, and they took the Ark of the Covenant and they brought it in, and you remember that it had knocked over the their Dagon god was like a half fish and so forth, and it fell down and then it broke and so forth. And everybody in the town got hemorrhoids and other stuff going on. There's mice running around, and it was just terrible. So they thought it must be a curse with this Ark of the Covenant. And they would take it and they move it from this city, from Gath to Gaza, all right? And then everybody in that city, the same things happen to them. Oh, well, let's move it over to Ashkelon. So they take it and they move it to Ashkelon. And then all these people, and the people in Ekron are going, no, we don't want it, all right? And that's when they decided, well, let's just send this thing back, okay? But it went to all of these different cities, and it seems like these 5 cities are all 5 strongholds, but it almost seems like Gath is kind of like the biggest of the 5 cities. Not absolutely positive on that, but it's mentioned the most, all right? And so we have this, a Gittite is a person from Gath, and in all likelihood a Philistine. That was a Philistine stronghold. We see that David had been to Gath a number of times. The very first time that David went to Gath is in 2 Samuel chapter number 21. And he is running from Saul, and David he's gone to see the priest, all right, and he's got Goliath's sword with him. And he runs, and he's trying to hide from Saul, and he says, I'll go to Gath. I can't follow David's logic here, all right? But he gets to Gath, and he's got Goliath's sword with him, and the people are there, and David comes in, and the men of Gath say to the king, whose name is Achish, they say, isn't this David whom they say, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s? Isn't this the guy who killed our champion, Goliath? And David realizes, I'm not in a good place here. All right? This was probably not such a good idea. So David, in 1 Samuel chapter number 21 and verse number 13, he says this, and he changed his behavior before them and feigned himself mad in their hands and scrabbled on the doors of the gate and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. So he's foaming at the mouth, trying to bring up as much spit as he can gather to foam there and scrabble all over again and act like he's nuts, all right? Which he really was to go to that city, all right? And the king says, what do I want a crazy man here for? Get rid of this guy, and he leaves, all right? We know that Saul continues to hunt David down, and David goes back to Gath a while later. This time he's got 600 men with him, all right? He's not coming to fight. Again, he's coming to hide from Saul, who is hunting him. But these 600 men, you'll remember, that came to David, they were men with debts, and they were men that couldn't make the grade anywhere else, and they were just the riffraff of society, more or less. But when they got with David, David changed them into these are valiant soldiers, all right? And he got there with these men, and he actually stayed there in Gath and became good friends with Achish, actually, for a while, and so forth. So he was there in Gath again at that particular time. Another time we see Gath again. It's mentioned several times. We looked at the snake Shimei a couple of weeks back. You remember when Shimei's servants ran away? Where did they go? They ran to Gath, and then Shimei went to Gath to get his servants. And then he came back only to find out that he wasn't supposed to, not only to find out, he already knew he wasn't supposed to leave Jerusalem, because he was killed, all right? But we have there this place of Gath, and these Philistines of Gath. And this man named Ittai here, in verse number 19, it says, then said David to Ittai the Gittite. Ittai is a Philistine, all right? Almost positive for sure. He is a Philistine. He's from the Philistine nation there, and he's got 600 men with him, also Philistines. And they have defected from the Philistines to come to be part of David's army, okay? And as they have just come, if we look down at verse number 20, it says, whereas thou camest but yesterday, whether that means literally yesterday or just, you've only been here a very, very short time, okay? They come to David, and here's David. You guys just got here, all right? And here I am running for my life. So David tells them, in verse number 19, he says, "Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, Wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and an exile." So he's exiled from the Philistines. He says, and you're just here now, as I told you in verse number 20 there, where it says, you just got here. You don't need to come with me. You don't need to we're living on the run here. And we're going to be hunted by Absalom. And you can go back to the city and be safe in the city like you don't owe me anything, all right? And you can stay there, all right? Verse number 20, it says, "Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us? Seeing I go whither I may, return now and take back thy brethren." He says, go back where you're safe. You don't need to be here. There's three reasons, really, why people serve. Why people serve the Lord. Why people serve their country. But we're looking at more why people serve the Lord. And one of those reasons people serve the Lord is because it's our duty. We do it because it's my turn, so I'll do it. I'm going to usher, going to work in the nursery, going to whatever we're going to do, but it's my turn, so I will do it. Do it out of duty. The second reason people serve is that they serve out of, it's an obligation, all right? It's something that I owe. I have a debt, God did all this for me, I owe back to him. We sing the song, he paid a debt I could not pay, he owed a pay. How does the song go? He paid a debt I could not pay. Anyway, I owed a debt I could not pay, and he paid for that. And some people will serve because there is that debt that they owe, an obligation, okay? The third reason is they serve out of devotion. I love to, I love him, and I want to. This duty, David is saying here, he says, look, you are new here. You are not required to do this, all right? There was a commercial years ago, and it was a young man. He was struggling as to whether or not to go through with a marriage. In his home country, arranged marriages were the thing that was there, and he'd lived in North America for a while, and he kind of got used to the idea of not having to do everything the way that they did back in his old country, and he was having second thoughts about adhering to this ancient custom, especially because he'd never ever seen this girl. So he goes to the airport, and he's got flowers in his hand, and he's going to kind of do what he's got to do, and he's there, and he's got a really kind of a really glum, worried look on his face. And then out from the terminal, this girl comes out, and he looks at this girl, and she is gorgeous. So the look on his face changes. Why did the look on his face change? Because he saw her. I think a lot of us, if we could just see, not necessarily physically with our eyes, but if we could see God, understand who he is, it would give us a different aspect of how we should be serving him. If we could just see him, understand who he is, and get to that point where we love to spend time with him. We love to spend time in his word, where you get to where you pray and you lose track of the time because you're fellowshipping with God. If we can just get a hold of that, to the reality of who he is, it would change our motivation for why we serve and why we do what we do. All right? David was telling Ittai, he says, it's not your duty here to do this. You have just got there. David tells him, the second one, you're not obliged to do this. This isn't an obligation. You owe me nothing. He says, whereas thou camest but yesterday. And then he goes on and he says here at the end of this verse, I purposely didn't read the whole verse. Let me read the whole verse to you. Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us? Seeing I go whither I may, return now and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. You know what David's saying? Mercy and truth be with you. He's saying, if you go back, it's okay. I am not going to hold that against you. There's not going to be any reprisals here at all. If you owe me nothing. You just go back where it's safe. There's no point in you wandering out in the wilderness with us and being hunted down like dogs by my son when you owe me nothing. It reminds me, as he's telling him, you can go back. Take your Bibles and come with me to the Gospel of John. Keep your finger there in Matthew, or in 2 Samuel rather, but in the Gospel of John, chapter 6. Jesus had done some serious preaching. I mean, all his preaching was serious, but it came to a point where he was telling some people some things that they could not comprehend and did not wish to comprehend. And we get to verse number 66. And it says, from that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. Many of his disciples, maybe some of the 70 that he had sent out in twos. And although he had given them power to heal and to, cast out demons and all these other things, it says many of his disciples. I think it included many of the 70 disciples. Did not include, it's not getting to the 12, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment here. But it says that many of them walked no more. It wasn't like they just left for a little while. They walked no more with him. And Jesus turns to his 12 disciples, and he says to them, he says, verse 67, then said Jesus unto the 12, will ye also go away? It's like he's given them are you going to leave? That's what David said. You can go. And it kind of understand here where Jesus is saying, and all these people left, and Jesus turns to his 12 disciples, and he says, will you also go away? Then Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life, and we believe and are sure. I like that. Not only do we believe, that covers it all already, and are sure, okay, we know this, that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered them, have not I chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil? And he spake of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. For he it was that should betray him, being one of the 12. Jesus knew who he was, yet he chose him. But he says to his disciples, are you going to leave? And they say, we can't leave. Very similar to David. And David comes back there in 2 Samuel chapter 15. And he tells him that he can leave. All right. And Ittai, verse 21, says this. And Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord liveth. You know what that tells me right there? Ittai is not worshiping Dagon anymore. All right. He is worshiping God, and that's what he has recognized in David as to who is the real God. As the Lord liveth, and as my Lord the King liveth, notice there's a capital L on the first one, little l on the second one. Surely in what place my Lord the King shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. I'm going to come with you, David, even if it costs me my life. It doesn't matter. He has found God in Israel. I think that there's many more people that we probably don't think of it this way. We think, because when we're reading the Old Testament, it's so focused on Israel. But there's many other people outside of the nations of Israel that accepted who God was. It even talks about them in the laws, and talks about the stranger within thy gates. These are other people that come and saw who God was. We know Rahab, the harlot. All right, in Jericho, she came. It's actually in the line of Jesus. All right, and my theory, it's only a theory. It's no verses I can support for this. All right, but my theory is one of the spies that went in there and got her, married her, and that was Salmon. Okay, but that's just Lenore makes me watch too many of these love movies, so that's why I think it might be true. Okay, but there's Rahab. There is Ruth, who is a Moabite. All right, or Moabitess. Okay. There is Ittai and his 600 others that we're going to see in just a moment that decided we want God. And all those strangers, like I mentioned in the law, there's many of them, many more of them. God's hand was all over. He said, he would wipe these people out. If they would turn to him, he will accept them. It doesn't matter what anybody has done. Salvation is open to all. And it was back then, and it still is now. But Ittai had learned some things about David. Maybe when David was in Gath with David's 600 men. Maybe he had seen some things there, and then he defected from the Philistines, and he'd come over to be with David and with Israel. And we see here that what David follows up with here, in verse number 22, it's important. Every word of this verse is important. And David said to Ittai, go and pass over. He's talking about, you can go across the brook Kidron here. He says, go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men, there was 600 of them. If we were to back up in verse 18, it tells you there was 600 of his men with him. But it didn't stop there. It wasn't just Ittai the soldier and Ittai the commander of this group of men and the 600 men. You know who was also coming with them? Their children. And all the little ones that were with him. His family. It is so important that we include our families in everything that we do for the Lord, if we can. Bring them alongside you. If you're coming here to do something at the building, all right, even just something as simple as that, bring your kids with you. Let them serve alongside you. If you're helping out, handing out flyers or something like that, bring your kids along with you and have them serve alongside you. It is so important to do that. But Ittai they weren't just escaping. They weren't just renegade people. They were family people. They had children, and they brought them with them, and they were on the run because they knew that Absalom was not somebody you could trust. But they knew that David was someone whom they could trust. Even though, and David is there saying, listen, you don't owe me anything. This isn't your duty. This isn't your obligation. You don't need to come. Ittai wasn't coming out of his duty. He wasn't coming out of obligation. He was coming because he loved David, and he loved David's God even more than David. And we see later, if we were to look in chapter 18, where David divides his men and they're going to battle against Absalom, and David says, be careful with my son, and don't hurt my son. Remember that? And he divides the group up into three people, three leaders. And there's Joab, and there's Abishai, and there is Ittai is also over one third of those men that in his group. And then we never hear from him again. Don't know anything else about Ittai. Possibly he died in that battle. We don't know. Doesn't tell us. But we do know this, that he served because he loved him. He served because he loved his God first. His Lord is mentioned first. Just want us to just stop for just a moment here and just think, why do I do what I do for God? Do I do what I do for God? And many people here serve the Lord, and I'm so grateful for that. Do we serve because it's our duty to do? Do I tithe because it's my duty to do? Do I do this in the church because it's my duty? Do I do this because I'm obligated? After all, this is what God did for me. It's true, but it's a terrible motivation. The motivation ought to be because I love him. Because I want that relationship with God, not a relationship as one thing when we looked at Romans back last year when we were finishing up the book of Romans, and the thing that just really grabbed me about salvation, the aspect, it shows all the different aspects of salvation, and they're all important. One is not more important than the other, but the one that really got a hold of my heart was that we are adopted. We are brought into the adoption of his sons. We are his servants, and we are far below God, but he's adopted us as children. We're heirs and joint heirs with Christ. And it's so important that we see God like that man in that commercial. Things changed when he got to see who he was going to marry. He wasn't sure, she's going to have one eye in the middle of her forehead or something when she got off the airplane, all right? But he got to see her, and things changed. And that's just a pretend little story. But if we get to see who God is, and that only comes from a relationship with him, That's it. Where does our relationship to God? What do I do, what I do? Why do I not do what I don't do? Do I not do what I don't do because it's my duty, it's my obligation, or I'm worried about being stomped on, or I'm worried about being punished? God, whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. Is that what I do it for, or do I do it because I want to please God? There's so much that has got to do with our hearts and what our heart is before God. And we see that from these 3 or 4 little verses on this guy who's not even a Jew. He's a Philistine, all right? How much worse can you be than the Philistines, all right? They're evil, vile people. They stole the Ark of the Covenant. They had big old mean ugly Goliath and all the rest of it, and they persecuted the Israelites forever. He's just a Philistine. But he's a Philistine that turned himself back over to God. And we can learn some neat things from this man named Ittai. Served because he loved. Why do we serve? Let's pray. Precious Father, thank you